You're good. All right, thank you so much for coming. We're so excited to have the second annual Black Bear Weekend with Chris and the gang. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your presence. I'm going to turn it right over to Chris. He will do the introductions.
So, hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really honored that these people answer my emails. I mean, I'm really honored that they'll take the time to do that. But and then agreed to come and talk to me and you. So our goal today is to learn. Here are 3 bear researchers who are each doing different things in terms of learning what's happening with the bear populations in our region. And we also have Krysta, wildlife biologist from Texas Parks and Wildlife. And so we'll learn a little bit about what Borderlands research does, how that supports what Texas Parks and Wildlife does. And then Krysta can also tell us a little bit about what she's doing to work with property owners in our area right now and the kind of activity we're seeing with bear populations. I should let you know, last night we had an art reception at the 5th Street Gallery. That exhibit of paintings and drawings of bears are still there. This is the new painting that was of one of the bears that Borderlands research studied in Big Bend National Park. And Nicole Dickon, who just graduated and went off to Vermont, she filled me in on some of those bears that she studied. So this is just a little sample. After the talk, I'll be moving in the back to do a couple hours of 5-minute drawings of animals. And something I've done a few times at the bookstore before. If that's something that interests you, there's a sign-up sheet at the counter. I can only do so many, so if you want to be sure to get one, you can write your name down. They're $25 for the drawing. Let's see, there's also a sign-up sheet if you don't want a drawing, but you'd like to get emails about the wildlife artwork that I've been working on. You can sign up for that. And so that's more than enough about me. I'll sit down. And we're going to first talk to Caitlin about her project. So this is Caitlin Camp, everyone.
Yes,
So, yeah.
what
are you doing?
I'm doing a lot actually. But with my project, we're using capturing and collaring bears in the Demere region, which is Southwest Texas. Actually, it happened after Matt's project, Matt and Nicole. With their project, they kind of saw a lot of movement between Mexico and Texas and back and forth. So what I would like to answer some of my research questions are, like, what are these key connectivity areas that these bears are using to travel back and forth? And another questions I'd like to ask is what's important to them in these regions, like what resources they use. So like what we kind of learned in the Big Bend region was that they like to be in higher elevation areas, but now we're seeing them in lowland areas like Sanderson. So I'm also answering like what habitat is important for them.
So relative to scale, like how many bears are you tracking right now?
So collared we have 12 bears, but total we have 33. Most of them are collared in West Texas because there's more bears. So what I'm answering is it'll actually include all the bears in this area, West Texas and Southwest Texas. So, but specifically, other questions like, regarding the Trans-Boundary project is the border barrier system affecting their movement because they are moving between Mexico and Texas. And Jesse's kind of what you're going to be answering the questions.
Yeah, and so is there anything that you've observed today that surprised you, that you didn't expect to see?
Yes, there's so many, but I'll give 2. So we caught a bear in the Devil's River State Natural Area, which is north of Del Rio, and he traveled like 100 miles within a 1-month period and back, and just to Mexico and back. So it's just these amazing distances that these bears are traveling. But another one is we caught a female along the Pecos River, and she has 4 cubs, which is pretty amazing here in Texas. I think there was even one in Sanderson that we've seen.
Now, does it seem like number of cubs is related to amount of food resources available?
Some research, does point to that.
And so this is a particularly good year for food?
Possibly.
Yeah.
I think that's some of the questions I'd like to answer.
So let's see. So where are you at right now in terms of your project? Like what are you doing this week?
Oh, this week. Well, we're getting ready for our trapping season. It's usually in the fall.
Okay.
So that's like a big deal now. We're doing other things. We need to get collars ready. But Jesse and I will be in Del Rio, focusing on there, while Matt will be in West Texas.
And now, do you pick the fall because they're more likely to be looking for stuff to eat, so they'll respond to bait more, or why fall?
There is more activity in the fall, but
Ah,
it's hot in the summer. Like we've seen a lot of movement in the summer, but we can't capture them when
Right.
it's this hot.
yeah,
It's not very.
not safe for them.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesse, where do you come into this project, this transboundary project?
So I'm a newer master's student with Borderlands Research Institute. So I work hand in hand with Caitlin in the Del Rio and Eagle Pass area. In many regards, while she's doing more spatial research using GPS collars to track these bears, understand those movements on the landscape, I'm approaching it a little differently using photos. So I have actually right now across 3 counties, 50 trail cameras that I've placed between 24 different private lands. And more or less, those cameras will collect photos for a full year. And with that, we can understand, kind of get pictures of bears and kind of build models around why bears occur in specific areas at certain times of the year. So like Caitlin mentioned, we're really curious about these landscape factors that are pushing and pulling these bears around. Why do they like this part at this time of the year? Is it food resources? Is it because it's far away from, highways or other anthropomorphic factors? So we're more or less running these cameras for a full year and then making a big table of ones and zeros, saying, okay, the bear was here at this point, was gone for months, and came back again, and we can just run some statistical models and then kind of weigh that against different factors, like are we seeing bears more in the western part of our study area because it's away from the city of Del Rio? Is cattle operations or sheep and goat operations, does that have an effect on these animals and why they occur here at a specific time? So more or less, we're really curious about what's driving these bears on the landscape and kind of see how maybe even model that into the future of where we might see bears as they continue to naturally recolonize here in Texas. So we have a lot of bears here in Brewster County and far west Texas, but kind of out towards Del Verde County and Amistad, we're seeing just the beginnings of them really start to get established. So we've had some bears that have come through over the last couple decades there, but they're starting to establish their territories and start breeding. So at that point, we're seeing like how that's happening and what mechanisms are encouraging that, and try to understand that moving forward, especially.
So what was your process of deciding for placement of these cameras? I'm assuming you need landowner permission, obviously, but so what's that distribution look like, and how did you choose it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to be able to do this in a scientific method, we have to really try to randomize it as much as possible. So in a nutshell, we established a 12-kilometer buffer. So from the Rio Grande River, going about 7.5 miles out into Texas, is kind of our study area focus. And within that unit across these 3 counties, I more or less put a fishnet grid down digitally and had 222 possible places I could put these cameras. Then we just kind of draw straws, basically, of, okay, we have to randomly pick these so we don't bias our sampling where we're putting these cameras. We can't just go and put cameras exactly where we know there are bears, because that'll kind of mess up our statistics in some ways. So in many regards, 50 random grids or units were pulled, and then from there I reached out to many landowners, so through calls, letters, and in-person communication, really going to these places, shaking hands and talking with folks. I was able to get 24 different landowners. So most of them are private ranch owners. They run hunting operations, a lot of domestic sheep and goat production over there. But we are lucky to partner with Amistad Recreation Area. So we have 7 cameras over there currently, and then we have 2 at Seminole Canyon State Park there in Del Verde County as well. So a myriad of different private and public collaborators has really helped us be able to place these cameras and run them for a long time. So it's kind of like what we call mark recapture, but we don't have unique identifying characteristics on these bears. Sometimes they have like a chest blaze or something like, okay, that's probably the same bear. But in many regards, we can't really do a traditional mark recapture method what we see in wildlife biology, where they put earrings on them and then they count them and they can build a basic model of how many are in that area through time. We're doing this through, using different statistical models basically with these photos. We are curious about other wildlife too at these cameras. So we're curious about, these other animal communities and how many are there. So like the relative abundance of these other species and bears, but also how many different species are there. And then we also collect all this other data on that specific camera site. So those are some of these models that we're building is, okay, this one site is 3 miles from the Rio Grande River. That's not really developed. It's a livestock production area. We're able to put all these different factors into tables and then kind of weigh what has the most influence on, okay, this is a really hot bear camera. We had a lot of bears here. Why is that? So we're able to build all these models to help answer some of those questions based on all this data.
And where are you in the process? You said you're fairly new to the program, so like, what did you do this week?
That's a great question. So I'll be starting my second fall semester here August 25th. So in many regards, it's checking these cameras. I go out and check them every 2 to 3 months. They're kind of a long deployment. So I'm the guy who drives around and changes the batteries and SD cards. And then more or less we upload that to a database that actually Matt was a big part of designing for us in our program. And more or less we're able to sort through all those photos onto our database and I have some help from undergraduate students to ID each photo. Okay, this is a wolf, or not a wolf, a coyote. This is a black bear. This is a javelina. And then more or less from there we're able to then plug that in into some of these models. So I do a lot of that from tending to the cameras to uploading it and then building those statistical models as well. So this summer has been a big part of that, and just getting all these things in place. And actually presented at a mini research symposium we had here at Sol Ross. Every semester we highlight undergraduate and graduate research going on in the university. So I presented some current photo numbers and kind of totals that we currently have for our sampling unit that we're doing so far.
So that, you've got like a very rich data set there. Since you got bears, no bears. Which bears are they? Other species. Now, are those, is the specific species at one camera affected by the number of bears or other species that are there? So you've got so much information there. How tightly have you decided what your projects, the shape of your project? Like, if you like really nailed down, this is the question I'm answering, or are you kind of letting that fire hose work its magic for a while?
It can be overwhelming to some degree, just all that, especially with photos. You can get so much information, and then you're getting, annual precipitation and temperature, trying to factor all that in as well. It can be overwhelming. In many regards, we're trying to model all these different potential influences. So I have a whole table of different things that we're collecting data for, trying to quantify, and then relate that to why the bear is there at that specific time. So it's kind of a push and pull, but in many regards, I do have a scientific document that I'm getting signed right now, my research proposal. So we've working with our other professors and people who are on my graduate committee, we've been able to narrow that down in many ways. We're really curious about human influences on the landscape, as well as vegetative communities and kind of some of those seasonal variations. Those are the things that we're really going to test and kind of pull into these models to help, try to answer some of these questions about why black bears are here at this point in time.
Now, you're about to do your second season, so we're not seeing change yet, but that's something kind of question for both of you two. In that Del Rio, Amistad area, over the time you've worked on this, have you seen that, that chart building in terms of a number of bears that are in that area? Are you seeing that colonization happening or accelerating?
I haven't, yeah, I'm still learning our study area.
Gotcha.
But I have seen more bears in our study area, but I think that's a factor of getting access to more properties.
Right.
But Matt might be able to answer more of that.
Okay.
With more bears.
And so yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we're excited. We're excited as we continue to collect data, and the Transboundary project, what Caitlin and I are doing, we're pretty new, so we're really getting more callers out there and trying to get a really rich data set with my photos as well. And then that's really a good juxtaposition with Matt having this longer term project that's been collecting data for 4 years now, right?
Can I ask a question?
Oh,
What
sure.
about Big Bend National Park, the Chisos, Big Bend Ranch State Park, Davis Mountains, Fort Davis National Historic Site,
Yeah.
State
So-
Park?
Like in regards to their abundance, or like if there are bears there or not?
Are there, well, no, I was wondering about his cameras. Are you
Oh.
leaving them out? Is Big Bend not included?
So I'm just focused over in the Del Rio area. Think of this kind of like the farthest east that we're kind of seeing bears starting to establish breeding populations. Here in Brewster County, that's really Matt's project in the Trans-Pecos area.
Oh,
So
So, yeah, we're
you
Kind
can
of
talk about
split
that.
geographically.
Yeah,
The
so-
Trans-Boundary Project would be the Pecos River in east, and the far west Texas side would be the Pecos River in west.
Yeah, see,
Oh.
So
last
we're kind
year,
of split geographically.
last year we had Matt and Nicole, and we only talked about our side of things, and so we're spreading the love a little this year.
Oh.
And it
Well-
may help answer her question if you tell her where the Trans-Boundary Project funding is coming from.
Ooh, the Trans-Boundary Project. So in many ways, we have funding sources through the Borderlands Research Foundation. That's been a part of it, but working with Texas Parks and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Custom and Border Protection.
That last one you said is the key to his project. Customs and Border Protection is looking at the impact of the border wall on wildlife. And you're partnering also with A&M Kingsville, correct? Who's taking on other species, but looking at the border as well. BRI is focusing on the black bear side of that border project. So a lot of times with research, it depends on who's paying you to do the work, and that influences your question and your study area. And so you were talking about a 7.5 mile buffer from the Rio Grande. So they're really focusing on the border. That's that whole goal of that project.
That's an excellent point, because one of the most interesting things to me about any research going on is like, what are we trying to learn, and why is that the thing that we're trying to learn right now? And so Matt, tell us a little bit about, you've been doing this for a while.
A couple years, yeah. So the Bear Project started kind of officially in the summer of 2022. So this is kind of year 3, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, started capturing the first bears, putting out these GPS tracking collars in the summer of 2022. With, at that time, kind of the large implication of trying to better understand this recolonizing population. You know, because bears were historically abundant pretty much all across Texas, were extirpated from the state by the 1950s, and started to recolonize again starting in the 1980s. And you know, like you mentioned, that was pretty localized to Big Bend National Park for a majority of that time, from the 80s to probably within the last decade. It was pretty localized within Big Bend National Park. And within the past decade, bears have started to come out of the national park and pop up other places, you know, coming out of Mexico into the Del Rio area, Eagle Pass area. And so the project at that time, still the overarching goal, but to understand some of the habitat preferences and how bears are choosing to move back into the landscape. So just understanding more about the bears moving back into Texas. So my specific kind of slice of this pie is the analogy I always use, is trying to figure out how many bears there are. So I mean, understanding their movement corridors, how they're moving back and forth between different places, whether that be Texas and Mexico, or this mountain range and this mountain range, that is really important. From a management perspective, and also understanding their occupancy. So bears are selecting for habitat types like this. That is also really important for management. But also knowing how many bears there are is another really big piece of this puzzle. And since this recolonizing bear population is relatively new, like within a decade, there's really not a lot of information known about this population. There have been studies on Texas bears before, but it was pretty much only localized within Big Bend National Park. So now that bears are moving out and we have a broader landscape and more management implications for this, we're kind of re-upping this research effort. So yeah, trying to determine or estimate density or abundance. So how many bears are there on the landscape, and how do they distribute themselves on this landscape? So the hypothesis there is there's likely more bears at higher elevations because it's cooler, there's more water, there's more food, there's just more resources in general, and there's likely less bears kind of down in the desert lowlands, the shrublands, because it's the opposite of all those things. There's less water, it's hotter, there's less food, less resources. So you put anthropogenic stuff in there, but skip that for now. So my method for doing that is, so with Jesse's project, he is not reliably able to identify individuals from a camera. You can say yes bear, no bear, but you can't say yes, this is a bear and it is this bear. Some bears will have a blaze, and maybe sometimes, but not every photo of a bear you can say, okay, this is bear number 1, 2, 3. But with my stuff, that is exactly what I'm trying to do. I am trying to determine this is this bear at this location at this time. And I'm doing that with genetic markers from their DNA themselves. So I can put out hair snares. It's an object in which the bear just passively rubs on and leaves a hair sample on this device. And I can take that hair sample, extract the DNA, and do a microsatellite analysis and be able to determine, yes, this is bear number 1, 2, 3. It was at this site at this time, and use these hair samples across the landscape and through time and build kind of what Jesse was talking about earlier, a detection history of individual bears through the landscape across time, and be able to estimate density and also how density might vary given elevation or drought cycles or human presence, all of which would be really important for making management decisions.
Who do you work for?
Borderlands Research Institute.
Oh,
Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
okay.
the three of us are all with Borderlands
okay.
Research
Yeah,
Institute.
y'all just said I'm Chris. I'm.
I'm sorry. I don't
You're-
work reliably for anyone except myself and the city of Alpine. But
You're a professor.
I'm not. I'm an artist.
Okay.
I'm a
I don't know.
cartoonist and artist.
It's just using first names.
You're
I don't know
right.
who the
I
hell-
apologize. My name is Chris Ruggia. I'm director of tourism for the city of Alpine as a job, and I draw pictures. And I love what these guys do, and I like to learn from them and draw pictures based on the stuff that they tell me. And so that's the only reason I'm here. No credential of any kind.
So
Hey.
would you ever, question,
Yeah.
sorry,
Please.
would you ever have a bear that you tagged that went to his camera that went to your hair snare?
Absolutely, yeah. So what Caitlin mentioned earlier, the one thing she was surprised by is the massive scale at which these bears use the landscape. So yeah, we've had multiple occurrences of bears caught north of Big Bend National Park that decided to go to Mexico, and bears that were caught kind of in the Del Rio area that also decided to go to Mexico, that their paths cross.
Okay.
So that meaning that Eagle Pass to Big Bend Ranch State Park is all one kind of population. It's all one continuous gene flow, and it's less likely to have individual animals go that far east or that far west, but it could absolutely happen. Yeah.
So to keep answering the question, the Borderlands Research Institute is a part of Sul Ross State University. And so these guys, now you got your master's and went on to Tech?
Yes, so I got my master's at Sul Ross State University with Borderlands Research Institute also a couple years ago. And then, now I'm on my PhD. Caitlin and I are both on our PhD, and mine's kind of a joint thing between Sul Ross State University and Texas Tech.
And your name is Chris what?
This is
Matthew
Matthew Hewitt.
Yep.
Jesse Ellgren,
Thank you.
Caitlin Camp, Krysta Demere. So thank you for identifying the gap.
Good clarification.
So
yeah.
where's Borderlands Research Institute get the money to do this?
Yeah, so kind of the two different projects, right? The Transboundary project was some private donation dollars. A small subset of their funding is private donation dollars. And a great majority of it is U.S. Fish and Wildlife, so federal money, funneled through Customs and Border Protection Customs.
Well, that ain't
Yeah.
gonna happen much longer.
Hopefully the money sticks around for a minute, but we will see. But the Trans-Pecos project, so this side of the Pecos River, what I'm associated with, has also a couple different funding sources. What is funding my hair snare stuff, the density estimation project, is some private dollars, also through Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation, as well as a Pittman-Robertson grant, which is also through the federal government, funneled through Texas Parks and Wildlife Department to the university to fund this research. So,
Thank you. And
Yeah.
you'll get your PhD in what?
what is it called at Tech? Range and Wildlife Management. They have a different title for the actual name of the major, but Range and Wildlife
And
Management.
then you'll aspire to be a professor at a university, or?
I want to do wildlife research. Yeah, the teaching thing, I mean, is obviously very important, but it's not quite where my passions lie. But designing these projects, answering questions for management agencies, that's kind of where my passion lies. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You might mention that Borderland Research Institute does take donations.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. We have a wonderful website. We would welcome all of y'all's visitation to our website. Yeah.
So what members of the public probably don't realize is a lot of projects are federally funded, but almost all federal projects require a private dollar match to that. And so Parks and Wildlife could want to give BRI $1 million, but we can't unless BRI has a 25% match in private dollars to make that $1 million bigger. So any donations that BRI gets towards that count as private dollars can go to funding a future federally funded project.
Yeah, that could then be multiplied by
Yeah,
times
it
four.
just makes the project bigger, the amount of work they can do bigger. It's just a way to kind of multiply dollars and get more for your money, really.
So Matt, what's kind of the range of like how many bears at a snare? You know.
Yeah, so I said, I kind of
Yeah.
started doing this in the summer of 2022, but really the hair snare stuff is just starting right now. We've had kind of one trial season, kind of coming up with how to do this, but we're really still just starting the density estimation stuff. So what I've been doing for the past 3 years is kind of, landowner relations, Texas Parks and Wildlife relations, coming up with the trapping protocols, kind of getting the project built. And standing all of this stuff up. So actually just now getting to the density estimation side of things. So kind of to be determined. We are hoping that there are enough bears where we can get multiple detections at multiple sites and be able to have enough data to really, really estimate how many bears there are very well. Obviously the more data you have, the better you can do that. But yeah, no, we're going into our first kind of sampling season here, so we'll be setting the tone for sure.
So you did your trial run. So you laid out some snares.
We
You
did.
collected some samples. You confirmed that this DNA extraction process is working for you. and
Yes,
stuff like
yeah.
that?
So this DNA hair snare sampling technique is very standard for state agencies across the country and across the world. Hair snare sampling method is very common for bears. Grizzly bears, black bears, polar bears, of all bear species. It's non-invasive. It's, you don't have to physically capture the animal to be able to collect these samples. The bear gets to continue living its life and you get your samples. So it's a non-invasive technique. It's really attractive for a lot of reasons. Oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought. But, trees, yeah, thank you. That's exactly where I was going with that. But a majority of places that black bears in particular live, there's trees, right? Like you kind of associate black bears with a forested ecosystem. And that's absolutely not what we have here in the Trans-Pecos, right? And the most common hair snare method is to have 3 or more trees and you wrap barbed wire kind of around them to make a little corral. And you put something smelly or some sort of attractant in the middle, and as the bear goes over or under that barbed wire line, it'll leave some hair on the barb, right? It'll snag some hair and it'll pull it out of their skin, and you'll have a little hair sample. But we don't have trees to do that with. So some of this trial stuff was trying to come up with what our actual physical capture design was going to be. And we had 3 different designs that we tested a year and a half ago, which is also crazy. And the one that proved itself to be the most effective was an 18-inch chunk of decommissioned railroad tie. The big wooden block that's soaked in creosote or kind of that stabilizing chemical, and then wrap that in barbed wire. And why that works, bears are very strange. bears really, really like, or they experience the world through their noses. So, like whatever the statistic is, bloodhounds are some order of magnitude stronger noses than people. And bears are, again, like 8 or 5 to 8 times as strong as a bloodhound. Like, yeah, some of the strongest noses in the animal kingdom are like on this planet. So they experience the world through their noses. And that really strong chemical smell, they love that. Absolutely love it. And yeah, multiple times now we've gotten this on camera, and we've got quite a few hair samples from these devices. They'll find them and they'll kind of get down on their backs and rub on them and roll on them like a dog on something smelly. And they'll leave hair on that hair snare, and we can sample the hair that way. So yeah, that's what the trials have been so far, is kind of coming up with these techniques and the protocol for doing it.
But so I talked to Raymond first, and then I talked to Matt, and it just worked my way leech-like through the department. But we're so much that we're learning and observing. We don't know for sure, and this is what you mentioned just now, that you're in a new place, so you're seeing more bears. But we don't know for sure what's new and what is just something that we are seeing for the first time. So like the way that the bears are using the low desert resources, the first time we talk about it, it sounds like, oh, and they're starting to do this. And that's the question. Are they starting to do it, or have they been doing it all along? Maybe there's a few more of them now because we're getting that more activity in new places, or humans are now saying, I saw a bear here and I didn't, last year. So we've got that data that they're moving out. But I'd love to hear some thought about that question of like what's just something that we're seeing for the first time as opposed to it's happening for the first time.
Yeah. So those two things, you can think of them as independent, and in a lot of cases they probably are. But it kind of confounds that question in this particular scenario, because bears are actively moving into new places and are doing things that maybe we have never seen before, and maybe they haven't been doing since their extirpation. So yeah, what a bear would be doing if it had always been in that area, we'll never know, right? Because we're observing the active recolonization now. That's an interesting question. And maybe at some point in the future, when we have maybe a decade worth of data across a variety of landscapes and human density, covariant and whatnot, maybe we could answer some of those questions. But yeah, at the moment, it's so new. Yeah, we really don't know.
Now, are there analogs to this landscape where there are bears like California, et cetera, like that, or like how much of what we're seeing them do here is novel as opposed to like just new here, but you got a similar landscape where there's plenty of bears.
So
I can kind of answer that from a state agency talking to other state agencies. When Texas Parks and Wildlife goes and presents at these nationwide meetings and we show pictures of our black bear habitat here in West Texas, there's not a single state agency that believes it. So there's a bear in Arizona, there's a bear in New Mexico. Like, these places have to have similar habitat, right? Maybe they do, maybe bear are using them. But we show them a picture of Terlingua and their minds are blown. So I don't know what their bear's doing. I haven't spent much time hunting bear in Arizona or New Mexico, but those biologists over there seem to think what our bears are using is different to them.
Wow.
So,
in reading through the literature and stuff too, I think that is absolutely correct. I think the Chihuahuan desert ecosystem is very unique to black bears.
So does it seem then like, because correct me if I'm wrong at any point, but it seems like that huge distance of travel was a surprise, that with that, and is that something that seemed maybe is unique to our landscape?
Yes, and I think we do have some hypothesis on that too. So yeah, like I think people have always known that black bears are capable of moving these really large distances, but black bears and bears in general are incredibly lazy. If they find a food resource, they find stuff they like, they're not going to move a lot. You know, like they're gonna sit there and hang out, and eat berries on this berry bush until it's gone. So if there is abundant food resources, like in a lot of these other places that have more water, have more vegetation, have a lot more going on, bears don't have to move as far to find food resources. Whereas here, you know, especially an extremely dynamic system, sky islands, low desert lands that are good and poorer quality habitat, drought cycles, you know, we fingers crossed, hopefully maybe coming out of a little bit of a drought right now. Getting a little bit more rain this year than we have years past. So everything's gonna be better now than it was 2 years ago. So everything is changing a lot more here. It's a lot more dynamic than it would be other places. So bears are having to move a lot further to be able to meet all their caloric requirements. Get all the food that they need to be able to live their lives, right? So yeah.
You know,
Because in other states, bears that are translocated, so translocated means you remove it from any habitat that he could have been occupying. And maybe they move him, I'm just gonna throw a number, 500 miles or something. That bear will walk 500 miles back to that exact campground. But would that bear have ever moved 500 miles if he hadn't been translocated? Probably not. He's had his 15-mile radius that he was perfectly happy with. And so he was capable of doing that, but did he ever need to?
Yeah.
Whereas what Matt's
Yeah,
saying with
and-
our bears,
Yeah.
there's that biological need for survival.
And both of us, Trans-Pecos and Transboundary projects, have both seen like these 100-mile movements, these 80-mile movements from Texas back into Mexico.
And not just over the course of a season, but in just a month.
Yeah. And yeah, like nothing human influenced. Like they chose to do that, and that is relatively unique in the bear world. Yeah.
you know, this is really amazing, and to hear about your research and everything. Y'all realize that back in the 1950s at Yellowstone National Park, my husband said when he was a kid, they used to, the rangers would set up stands for park visitors to sit and watch, and they had the dumpsters there, and then you could just go and watch the
We've
bears.
learned a lot since then.
We've come a long way.
We have.
But I have a question. How does any of this interface with research being done with the mountain lions?
So
Great question. Yeah, in general, we mentioned Cesar Claiborne Wildlife Research Institute. That's part of Texas A&M in Kingsville. They're similar to BRI, but in many regards, they're doing a border-specific mountain lion research project. So trying to answer some of the same questions, spatial movement across the border and certain habitat factors. So we work with them, we're partnered with them in many regards to share photo data for my end, but also helping each other place these collars for spatial research. So those folks are doing more of the mountain lion specific research.
But a mountain lion would prey on a bear.
Oh,
No?
not documented.
Wouldn't?
Bears are usually the dominant species.
Oh.
Absolutely.
Yeah, now BRI did a pretty significant mountain lion.
Correct. And we have a history
Patricia
of doing
did,
a bunch of mountain lion research, but none of that is happening currently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, ranchers shoot mountain lions, don't they? I mean, they don't like mountain
Absolutely, yeah, they
lions
do.
because of their cattle or whatever.
Oh, definitely.
Well, and I highly recommend the BRI website. Look over all of the different studies that they're doing, because there's so many different species that these guys are looking at, many different graduate assistants, and recently added, I guess, sufficient budget to add some new people.
Yeah.
So we've got lots more new projects coming on where we're learning all kinds of great stuff about the wildlife in our area and the habitats. Yes.
Are there any management protocols in place for bears, or are they considered free game? I mean, can you go out and shoot one, or what's?
If you choose to shoot a bear in Texas, it'll cost you approximately $12,000. You will lose the gun that you shot the bear with. You will meet the judge. You have to pay that $12,000.
So that's the management right now.
Bears are a protected species in Texas. We just did our state ranking system to make sure we had them ranked correctly, and they are considered rare and threatened still in the state of Texas. So they are protected. They are a non-game species, and it is illegal to hunt, possess, or take a black bear in Texas.
Okay, so there's no hunting season?
There
Correct.
is no hunting season.
So they're protected, unlike mountain lions, which,
Mountain lions are
Free
also a non-game species, but there is no season on mountain lions, and there's no regulation. There were recent laws passed regarding trap check standards, but those are the most recent management implications to impact mountain lions.
So Krysta, let's connect what Matt was talking about with Texas Parks and Wildlife. So there's funding for this project from TPW, and how do you see that information informing what you do?
Yeah, so good question. So what do you have to have a hunting season? Or what do you have to know to have a hunting season?
you have to have information on the species.
You have to have information on the species. What specifically do you need to have with the hunting season?
License.
Well, you need to know how many of the animal is on the landscape, right? So there are a percentage of the population that you can harvest to have a sustainable population, but you have to know what your population is before you can ever even create a season to know how many tags could be issued or how many permits. I'm not sure what the future will look like with Texas Parks and Wildlife establishing a bear hunting season, and that whether that'll be tags or permits issued to a landowner in the future or how we're gonna do that. But right now, hunting season is off the table because we can't even answer how many bear do we have. But as an example of a hunting species that does have a low population, bighorn sheep in Texas. There's approximately 700 bighorn sheep in the state any given year. We only issue 5 permits a year on average in the last couple of years for bighorn sheep. So 700 sheep only equals 5 permits.
Yeah.
And when we estimate our black bear population now, we're estimating below 250. It might be a lot below 250, we're not exactly sure, but 250 in our mind right now is a number that we need to get higher than before we can ever really talk about anything.
And also maybe kind of understanding the dynamics in how this population fluctuates.
Mhm.
So if there's a very static number of bears and the reproduction is the same every year, that's a lot easier. But drought cycles, this metapopulation of connected sky islands, if we go into a drought, a bunch of bears are gonna move potentially back to Mexico or congregate in one particular area. So understanding the dynamics of how bears distribute themselves is also gonna be really important.
Yes, ma'am.
Debbie,
I
hi.
have a question, and it's about, I'm receiving data. I lived in the Terlingua area from '83, and still go down all the time. And we began, in '90, we had rains we had monsoons that were bad for a few years. The drought was so severe and so long. But what I'm getting now is data from my friends that are still on the land that the militarization of our border, which is multiplying in ways that even, I worked for TPWD for about 3 years on the Big Bend Ranch State Park. And I have concerns about that. Are you guys going to include that intrusion in any of your data collection, or can you make casual observations, and are they helpful?
So that is exactly what kind of this other side of the project is looking at. Not in the Big Bend region, just because there's not as much of that in the Big Bend region as there is Del Rio to Eagle Pass area. But I mean, yeah, if it becomes evident that is affecting black bear movement, or we suspect it might be affecting black bear population dynamics, absolutely, yeah, we'd love to study how that affects
and
things.
the local populations, if they observe a bear walking through their acreage, could notify TPWD or.
Yeah, so yeah, from a landowner's perspective, absolutely. every bear sighting, I think Texas Parks and Wildlife would love to know, would love to receive that.
That
Yeah.
makes us feel like we can help.
Yes.
And the other thing is I want to thank you all for your education. But you can tell I'm an educator.
Well, one of the things that comes to mind when you mention this possibility of movement with drought is the thesis that so when I first met Raymond Skiles, he shared, so he got the job as wildlife biologist in 1987 in Big Bend National Park, and in '89 visitors saw cubs in the spring that were confirmed as the first confirmed cubs born in the national park. So right after Raymond got the job, there were native-born bears in the park, and they became a bear park. So they had to go in high gear to learn as much as they could to avoid the Yellowstone kind of situation. It needed to be a new, well-informed kind of bear park. And so Raymond was facilitating a lot of research, and he shared the thesis that came out of that with me. Our first thing I read was that. So in '89 and '90 and so on, they're starting to study, get that population stuff. And around, I want to say it was 2000, but there was a big drought that they observed mortality and departure.
It was like 75% of the collared bears went from the Chisos Mountains back to Mexico.
Yeah. That was that time. But we've had plenty of drought recently, so and we're not seeing that departure. What we're seeing seems like is bears using the low desert, maybe in a way that they didn't.
Yeah, and there's.
I would say Parks and Wildlife based off of landowner reports only. That's all the data this is based off of. We did see some type of evacuation. Don't know where they went, don't know what they were doing, but when Matt first started, we had reports out the ceiling, and then we had a year where I got 4 calls the whole year. That's an exaggeration, but it was really low.
Yeah.
And so going back to establishing a season with Parks and Wildlife and what Matt said, when we say Texas needs X number of bears to have a hunting season, what are we calling Texas bears? If my favorite bear, we love to hate each other, BBMOA Oscar down in Terlingua. If Oscar spends 8 to 9 months a year in Mexico, is he still a Texas bear? So when we're talking about counting bear towards that Texas population, you've got huge movements where the population isn't static. So when you're trying to talk about what is the Texas population, might depend on the month, might depend on the year. We're not, there's a lot going on with bear.
Well, and so the next question then that I'd love to hear from you about, and you could share, is in our immediate area, what's happening right now? And if there are shifts, like what's the rate of those shifts in the last 6 months or something?
Yeah, so this is something that's been really surprising to me. You would think with drought conditions, you'd get a higher number of conflict reports, but we didn't. They went somewhere. I don't know where, but they're gone. The more rain we've gotten, the more active the bear have been, especially around the Tri-County area, and the more number of human-bear conflict reports, which seems the opposite of what I would be expecting.
You would think that they'd have natural resources that they wouldn't need to get in our
And
yards.
a lot of these are only sightings. They're not all involved in conflict, so it could be the natural resources are so abundant and so well spaced, the bears aren't congregating in a specific natural area, and they're able to disperse across the landscape a lot more evenly. And when they disperse evenly across the landscape, they're automatically going to come into contact with more people. So it could be as simple as that. We're not sure, but yeah, the more rain we've got, this summer has been busy for bear sightings and bear reports.
And have there been negative situations with bears on people's property?
Yeah, we have had some, we call it human-bear conflict, because managing bear is just as much about teaching and managing people and what people need to do to have bear-wise practices around their house. But with more sightings, we have experienced more conflict, especially around the Alpine area. Most of the conflicts centered around pet food, believe it or not. That's one of our biggest ones. A lot of people have deer feeders really close to their house. That's another huge attractive that's bringing bear in. And then, unfortunately, we've also had chickens be a huge attractant here this past year. So we've had a huge influx of human-bear conflict related to chickens.
So physiologically, on bears, just a little bit, bears are pretty well known for hibernating, right? Or going into torpor during the winter. And while bears here in Texas do that, they don't do it as much as they do other places in the country. But still, physiologically, they still go through that process. So coming into the fall, they go through a physiological change called hyperphagia, where they are just trying to eat as much food as possible before they go den. Even though bears here don't den as long or as deep, maybe if that's the right word, as other places in the country, still physiologically they have that drive. So a lot of this conflict does happen maybe in the fall, and also very related to food.
Yeah.
So
and right now we're probably getting towards the end of the breeding season.
for sure.
So
For sure.
So during the breeding season, black bear and this is probably not based off of Texas, but wherever. 5,000 calories a day during the breeding season months is what a black bear is trying to consume. When they enter fall and are going into hyperphagia, that 5,000 calories jumps to 20,000. So within just a couple months period, their food intake is going to quadruple. Their calorie needs going to quadruple. What are some of the best sources of calories? You think it's naturally occurring food
between dog food or prickly pear tunas.
Bird seed is
brisket fat.
excellent. Bird seed has a ton of calories in it. So, people feeding backyard birds, those bird feeders will bring bears in.
Bears are very lazy. They're not going to go eat tunas all day long when they can go and eat a bag of bird seed out of your backyard. So they're going to find the most concentrated source of calories that they can and eat it.
So Texas Parks and Wildlife right now, our basic mission is to try and help landowners be as proactive as they can. You don't need to wait until you have a bear problem before you try and find a solution. We're really pushing our bear-wise basics. There's some really simple practices that homeowners can take to make living in bear country much less of a headache on yourself or your neighbors. And a thing that a lot of people don't realize is even though you might be doing everything correct, it's a community-based approach. It matters what your neighbors are doing, and the community has to work together. Because Matt was talking earlier about how a bear can come back 6 months later because he got a reward, or a year later because he got a reward. He may walk 100 miles to come back because he got a reward. So you don't want to be the reason the bear walks 100 miles to come back to Alpine. And Parks and Wildlife is here to help you in whatever fashion you need, whether you're not comfortable with setting up electric deterrents or you need help doing that, we're here to help you. We can electrify deer feeders. We can create electric unwelcome mats to keep them out of your yard. We can electrify fences. We've helped people with chicken coops. So again, we're here to help. We've got a lot of resources available. Internal discussions are starting about maybe a potential cost share program for homeowners who want to be proactive. That's not something that I had a problem, I didn't do anything about it, I want my money back. This is, I'm being proactive, will you help me be proactive? So that's something we're considering for this community.
Yeah, and so Austin, your colleague, was on the radio yesterday morning answering some of these questions, and I asked him, well, apparently electricity is one of the things they like the least.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and it's not like a painful thing, it's just that feeling, they don't like it. And so I asked Austin, like, how much does it cost to electrify a chicken coop? And he says it might be $100, maybe $150 too.
Not a big deal.
And it does depend on your unique setup. We've had to get very creative because no two people have the same setup when it comes to their chicken coop or their deer feeders. You'd be surprised how different deer feeders look. There's all kinds of designs. So Parks and Wildlife can help you work through that process of what works best for you. Cost also depends on how big of an area you're trying to protect. So a larger area, your cost is going to go up a little bit. But out here, our biggest problem has been how dry the soil is, and it doesn't act as a good conductor. And so we've had to add additional panels in to kind of act as just a little more punch. When the bear steps on the panel, it conducts electricity a lot better than the ground does. So that increases cost a little bit too. But yeah, it's something that we've worked with a whole bunch of landowners on, and we're happy to work with anybody on.
I have a question. Thank you for your research. I love hearing about all of it. But it sounds like the goal is to support the bear population. I don't know, is 250 bears a lot of bears or not a lot of bears? Are you trying to get more bears? And if you're trying to get more bears, like what are the interventions to promote the population, not necessarily keep them from the chickens?
So I wouldn't say Parks and Wildlife has an end goal. This entire process has been natural recolonization. Texas Parks and Wildlife has never brought a black bear in, has never released a black bear. We just had a population that was extirpated, and through protection, we've allowed that natural species to recolonize natural areas. That 250, that's not a number that actually means anything. It just, in our state ranking, we've got different categories, and one of the categories is 1 to 250. It doesn't actually mean a whole lot. But in our mind, we think we still have less than that 250. But that's for the entire state. So I'm including whatever random bear shows up in the Panhandle or whatever random bear shows up in East Texas. When you're talking about the entire state of Texas, if that number was the number we were going for, that's probably not very many bears at all, especially when you're considering every other state that has a huntable population, they have bears in the thousands. So Louisiana is a state that recently opened a black bear season. They have a really great podcast out. I forget who the person was that did the podcast, but they interviewed the biologist there with Louisiana. And it's a great podcast to listen to see how a state works through the process of opening a bear season for the first time. But yeah, Texas pretty much right now is we're just in this, I guess, goal of just allowing this natural or native species to come back to where it's been and helping our landowners as best as we can to learn. Unfortunately, it's going to be a really steep learning curve. When you went from having black bear extirpated for 40 years to now they're back. So we're learning, we're going to learn with y'all, we're going to learn with DRI, they're going to help inform management, and we'll see how this develops. There's going to be lots of conversations within the agency and with our research partners as we learn more.
Krysta, any way Texas Parks and Wildlife might open a hunting season on the Aoudad, the Barbary sheep? Being a ranger at Fort Davis National Historic Site, in the evening studying great horned owls, watching the nest, we've counted 80 to 100 come out, since they're crepuscular. What the hell?
Great news for you. It's open season.
It's always open season.
It's always open season.
Right. But did Texas Parks and Wildlife bring them into Texas originally because of the bighorn sheep being low and
So I'm
numbers?
not informed enough to give you the actual history, but I believe your statement's correct. And I believe it happened in the Panhandle.
Why aren't they on menus at restaurants? If you go to the Gauge, you eat elk brought from New Zealand. Why can't we eat our own Audads that are so destructive?
I've thrown around the idea that Alpine should have an annual Aoudad cook-off. Yeah, Brady, Texas, where I'm originally from, has the annual goat cook-off. It brings in a whole lot of tourism, a whole lot of money. There's a lot of competitions. maybe our answer is to have the Alpine Aoudad cook-off. And you can talk to your city officials.
I certainly help promote it.
So I have a quick question. So you used the word extirpated. Why did they go away?
Yeah, so through overhunting was probably a great majority of it. So black bear actually taste fairly good. They're a really fatty critter, obviously. So they're just kind of like a dark pork meat. And there's been multiple, I guess, documentations of newspapers, back in the 40s, 50s, like advertising bear hams for Christmas dinner.
Oh, so they were overhunted.
Overhunted, yeah, and just a very low tolerance of large carnivores in the United States at that time. So these, very large scale eradication efforts of, mountain lions, foxes, coyotes, wolves, like across the U.S. This is not a Texas specific thing, but yeah, very, very low tolerance of large carnivores at that time.
I have one more question for your little hair bear scare thing.
Yep.
Bobby Bear goes by.
Mhm.
Betty Bear goes by.
Mhm.
Henry Bear goes by.
Mhm.
Millions of hairs. Do you have to do all the hairs on that one?
Yeah, so that is kind of one downside. So we are sampling these every week and visiting them and removing all the hair. And we are considering the hair on each barb,
Right.
on the barbed wire, as an individual sample.
Right.
So ideally, there wouldn't be 2 bears visiting the same site in each week.
Oh.
But we're also going to have game cameras observing the hair snare. So if it does happen, we could say, okay, we suspect there's 2 bears. We're going to treat every sample on this log different. And we're gonna amplify all of these or do DNA extraction on all of these. Whereas if on that camera we see 1 bear come by, leaves a sample, there's 4 samples, 4 barbs that had hair.
Right.
Like, okay, we have no reason to suspect that this isn't all one individual. And just do it that way. But that would be a problem. Yeah.
How do bears and sheep and cattle get along?
So
Well, I can answer
Yeah,
that
go for
because
it.
it's kind of management related. I really like data and databases, and so when I started, we had reports going all the way back to the 60s that were in paper form. And this thing happened around the early 90s, early 2000s, where it is the internet, and databases actually got put on the internet where you could talk to your coworkers across the state. Well, we had all those paper forms that had never been entered in our digital database, and so I'm crazy and I wanted to enter all of them. So I did, and throughout the history of black bear recolonizing, we've had very limited interaction with livestock. I'm not saying there hasn't been cases, there has. Since I've started, I've been with Parks and Wildlife 5 years. I've only had 2 calls in 5 years. One of them, we couldn't confirm that the bear actually killed the goats. It's quite possible the goats were killed by coyotes and a bear scavenged them afterwards. But we did have one where the bear was actually seen in the act of killing a goat. So in 5 years, I've had 2 reports. But the 10 years before that, there might have only been 1. And then the 20 years before that, we didn't have any. So since bears have recolonized, it's been low.
And to tack a little bit onto that, some of that research in the late 90s, early 2000s did do a little bit of the diet study. And I think it was 2 or 3% of black bear diet was animal matter. So 97, 98% of their diet was vegetation. So they are great majority herbivores. So I mean, they're omnivores, right? But,
And from what Nicole observed in this Nicole Dick in her project on habitat use, she observed I think maybe 2 examples of a bear actually killing a javelina to eat it.
Yeah.
But all the other meat was already dead. Was
correct. Yeah. So I think out of the 120, 150 cluster sites that she visited, 2 of them did have javelina, and obviously there's no way of confirming that the bear killed it, but there was a lot of evidence there to suggest that the bear did actually kill that javelina. But yeah, out of the 120, 150, 2 sites had anything to do with animal matter.
And so now I'm not going to cut this conversation off, but I do need to start drawing. So I think the talking to the room part is probably gonna over, unless anyone wants a last comment, but please come up and keep talking. There's no reason to stop or leave, but
And I've got a bunch of outreach material for people who do live here locally or in bear country. If you don't live in bear country, I'd ask that you don't take a whistle, but if you do live in bear country, please take a whistle.
And Alpine and Sunny Glen is bear country.
All of this is bear country. If you're coming from Houston, don't
and
take
so
a
the
whistle.
whistle is gonna attract the bear to be your friend.
And the whistle, if you see a bear get in your dumpster, you should blow it, or what? What's
So the whistle's just an easy way for you to make noise. Actually, the best deterrents on bear are things that they can associate with people. So banging a pot doesn't necessarily mean person. Yelling at the bear means person. So you can blow the whistle, you can yell at the bear, hey bear, whatever you want to yell. I'm not gonna limit you on but anything that says person and I'm mad at you and you need to leave, that's what you need to do. If you're in a situation and you're a little afraid, you can hit your clicker on your keys and set your car alarm off. That's really good. That'll get his attention. He'll leave. But if you reinforce that with the hey bear, that's even better. So anything that establishes negative reinforcement with bear is what we want to do.
What does bear poop look like? A scat sitting in the hiking trail. What? You have a picture of it?
I think I can find one if you're really interested. It kind of depends on what they're eating, but in general, they're kind of like a small pop can size. So they can, for an adult bear, like almost the size of a Red Bull can. Kind of stubby on the ends. So depending on what they're eating, more berries, it looks different, or insects. I've seen a black bear scat and grizzly bear scat that would shine in the light because of all the ant exoskeletons. It would eat thousands and thousands of ants and it would shine, which is weird. They're kind of a coarse dog scat, large dog scat, a little stubbier.
Not like javelina, little balls or deer or something.
Oh yeah, definitely.
A lump.
Yeah, ranges from something formed kind of that described or that is based off that description to a very loose pile, depending on what they're
6 inches across? Or,
depends on the bear.
or 2?
Yeah.
Depends on the bear.
So yeah,
very
we visited some of these cluster sites that a bear was eating a lot of yucca, and there's not a lot of nutrition in yucca, so they have to eat a lot of it. And you probably could have filled a gallon bag full of bear poop that they left over 4 hours or something. Yeah.
Prickly pear or yucca?
So yucca, like Spanish dagger, that the growth stem in the middle, so not the flowering stalk, but the kind of main stem in the middle that all the leaves kind of lay out of, they'll go and tear that out.
What are their tongues made of if they can eat that?
It's softer.
Yep, so like the bottom 4 inches of that are actually really palatable. They don't taste all that bad. Yeah, so yeah, they're tearing out that middle growth stem and eating the bottom 2 to 3 inches of it. And there's lots of Spanish dagger out there. They can eat a lot of it. It's really low quality, but there's a lot of it. Yeah.
That's good, thank you.
Yeah.
And just to highlight our great friends at Front Street here, this is the book that all Texas Parks and Wildlife biologists have read. It's Living with Bears Handbook. It's the book that all state agencies promote, and we're not able to purchase it and hand it out, but Front Street Bookstore did. And so if you're interested in reading the book that all of us biologists have read, I believe they have it up at the front for you. So I really appreciate them helping us with outreach. But this book is great. Any questions you have, it probably has the answer.
And folks, I'm going to head back in the back room and start doing some drawings. If you're interested in seeing some 5-minute drawings happen, come on back. If you'd like one, there's a sign-up sheet on the table.
Oh my God.
No, you're good. Feel free to take a whistle and stickers.
Yeah.